The diplomatic incident, the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Confederation gleamed under the light of 1,000 floating luminaries, each representing the member worlds that had gathered for this momentous occasion. The curved walls displayed shifting holograms of cosmic phenomena, serving as a reminder of the vastness they all shared despite their differences. At the center of it all stood Morgan Hayes, Earth's newly appointed ambassador, his dark blue formal attire a stark contrast to the elaborate and often ostentatious garments worn by the representatives of older spacefaring civilizations. Morgan walked with measured steps toward the speaking platform, conscious of the hundreds of eyes following his movement, some with multiple pupils, others with compound structures, and a few that weren't eyes at all but sensory organs that served the same purpose. The Keldorians, with their iridescent scaled skin and imposing height of nearly 8 feet, occupied the most prominent position in the assembly. Their empire had dominated galactic politics for centuries before humans had even achieved spaceflight. Representative Hayes announced the neutral AI moderator, its holographic form shimmering above the central podium. You may present Earth's petition for mining rights in the Proxima Centauri system. Morgan nodded and activated his presentation. 3-dimensional star charts materialized in the air, highlighting the resource-rich asteroid belt that Earth desperately needed to fuel its growing fleet and colonies. Distinguished representatives, Morgan began, his voice clear and confident. Earth respectfully requests access to the unclaimed mineral deposits in the outer reaches of the Proxima Centauri system. Our surveys indicate these resources have remained untouched for millennia, and our extraction methods will cause minimal disruption to the system's delicate equilibrium. A low murmur spread through the assembly as Morgan continued presenting Earth's case. Humans had only joined the Confederation 50 years ago, and their rapid technological advancement and expansion had unnerved many of the established powers. Before Morgan could finish, Supreme Delegate Zethnar of the Keldorian Empire rose from her ornate seat. Her scales shifted from blue to a deep purple, a sign of displeasure that Morgan's cultural briefings had prepared him for. The Assembly recognizes Supreme Delegate Zethnar, the AI moderator announced. Once again, the humans demonstrate their ignorance of galactic protocols. Zethnar's voice resonated throughout the chamber, its harmonic undertones carrying subtle messages that human ears couldn't detect, but that made several alien representatives shift uncomfortably. Proxima Centauri lies within the historic buffer zone established by the Treaty of Seven Suns. The Keldorian Empire categorically rejects this presumptuous request. Morgan maintained his composure. With respect, Supreme Delegate, our research into Confederation archives shows no formal claim on this region. The Treaty of Seven Suns established buffer zones around inhabited systems, and Proxima Centauri contains no settlements beyond Earth's own research station. The chamber fell silent. Challenging a Keldorian, especially one of Zethnar's standing, was unusual. Morgan could feel the tension rising but stood his ground. You question the Empire's historical records? Zethnar's scales rippled with deepening color, now verging on black. She glided forward with unnatural grace, her ceremonial robes flowing around her towering form. I seek only clarity based on publicly available information, Morgan replied, standing tall despite being dwarfed by the Keldorian delegate. What happened next violated 5 centuries of diplomatic protocol. Zethnar's right hand shot forward, with lightning speed, connecting with Morgan's face in a resounding slap that echoed through the suddenly silent chamber. The impact was hard enough to snap his head to the side, leaving an angry red mark blooming on his cheek. The assembly erupted in a cacophony of shocked exclamations, translated by the chamber's systems into a disorienting blend of voices. Several empathic species physically recoiled from the emotional discharge that filled the room. But Morgan didn't retaliate. He didn't even raise his hand to his injured face. Instead, after a moment that seemed to stretch for eternity, he slowly turned his head back to face Zethnar, his gray eyes unnervingly calm, locked with the Keldorian's vertical pupils. Is that the official response of the Keldorian Empire to Earth's proposal? Morgan asked, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. A small trickle of blood ran from the corner of his mouth, but his expression remained composed. Zethnar's scales flickered rapidly between colors, a sign of confusion and, surprisingly, unease. Humans were known for their emotional responses. Their diplomatic corps had been trained to maintain composure, certainly, but none had ever faced such a direct challenge and responded with such eerie calm. "This assembly is adjourned," declared Zethnar, her harmonic undertones now discordant. "The Proxima Centauri petition is denied." Morgan bowed with precise formality, not too deep, which would signal submission, but not too shallow, which would indicate disrespect. "The Earth delegation acknowledges the adjournment, though we note that proper voting procedures have been bypassed. We will revisit this matter through appropriate channels." As Morgan turned to leave, the assembled delegates parted before him. Some whispered about human weakness, others watched with newfound curiosity, and a few, representatives of worlds that had chafed under Keldorian dominance, observed with calculating interest. In the sleek diplomatic shuttle returning to Earth's orbital embassy, Dr. Ilara Way, the embassy's chief xenoanthropologist, examined Morgan's injured face with a medical scanner. "You're going to have an impressive bruise," she said, applying a healing compound to his cheekbone. "Though I'm more concerned about why you didn't activate your personal shield. That slap could have done serious damage if she'd used her full strength." Morgan winced slightly as the compound began its work. "Shields are for unexpected attacks. This was something else." He accessed his neural interface, replaying the incident with enhanced focus on Zethnar's physiological responses. "Notice how her tertiary breathing slits flared before the slap? That's not anger, that's fear." Ilara leaned closer to examine the footage. "You're right. And the scale pattern, that's not just aggression coloration. There's a stress response mixed in." She frowned. What would make a supreme delegate of the Keldorian Empire afraid of a mining proposal? "Exactly," Morgan nodded. "Something doesn't add up. The Proxima Centauri system is unremarkable except for those mineral deposits. No strategic value, no historical significance we know of. Which means there's something there they don't want found," Ilara concluded. Morgan's neural interface pinged with an incoming priority message. "Ambassador Hayes," came the voice of Captain Reyes from Earth's defense fleet. "We've detected unusual movement from the Keldorian diplomatic vessel. They're conducting deep scans of our embassy and have requested an emergency communication channel with their homeworld. Something's got them spooked." "Thank you, Captain. Maintain surveillance, but take no action." Morgan turned to Ilara. "I need access to everything we have on Proxima Centauri, especially anything the Confederation might have classified or redacted. That crosses about 24 diplomatic agreements," Ilara warned. Morgan touched his swollen cheek. "Funny how getting slapped in front of the entire Confederation rearranges one's priorities." For the next 6 hours they worked tirelessly, breaking through encryption, layers and cross-referencing data fragments. Ilara's specialized algorithms identified patterns in seemingly unrelated information, gradually building a picture that became more disturbing with each new piece. "Look at this," Ilara said, enlarging a holographic display of ancient star charts. "These symbols keep appearing in Keldorian restricted archives, always in connection with systems they've claimed as historic buffer zones. Proxima Centauri has the same marking." Morgan studied the symbol, a complex geometric pattern that reminded him of DNA strands. "What does it mean?" "I'm not certain, but I found references to something called the progenitor sites. The linguistic context suggests these aren't archaeological locations, but something actively maintained." Their research was interrupted by an alert from the embassy's security system. "Ambassador Hayes' urgent communication request from Supreme Delegate Zethnar. She is demanding a private audience." Morgan and Ilara exchanged knowing looks. "They're trying to determine how much we've discovered," Ilara whispered. "And that confirms we're onto something significant." Morgan straightened his uniform and touched his bruised face. "Accept the communication, but route it to my private office. I think it's time we change the game." As he headed toward his office, Morgan's mind raced with possibilities. Whatever the Keldorians were hiding in Proxima Centauri, it had caused a supreme delegate to break centuries of diplomatic protocol. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was uncovering secrets others preferred to keep buried. The calculated response. The news of the slap spread through the Confederation like wildfire. The human who didn't flinch became an instant cultural phenomenon, spawning countless memes across the galactic networks. Morgan Hayes found himself the subject of intense curiosity, with representatives from dozens of worlds finding excuses to engage him in conversation. "Is it true that humans don't register pain as other species do?" asked an amorphous Luvarian diplomat, its gelatinous body pulsing with interest. "We feel it," Morgan replied with a practiced smile. "But we choose what meaning to assign to it." 3 days after the incident, Morgan received Alara's encrypted report during a minor trade discussion. Instead of trying to evade Keldorian surveillance, she had chosen a bold strategy, making conspicuous visits to representatives of species who had historically opposed Keldorian dominance. At each embassy, she left data packets containing fragments of their research, never enough to reveal the full picture but sufficient to provoke reaction. The Keldorians had taken the bait. Their intelligence officers shadowed Alara openly, abandoning subtlety in their urgency to discover what information she was sharing. The Confederation's Harmony celebration provided the perfect stage for Morgan's next move. Held in the massive floating gardens, an architectural marvel where gravity shifted subtly between different planetary norms, the celebration was the social event of the diplomatic calendar. Representatives from 1,000 worlds mingled amidst exotic flora that changed colors and forms in response to emotional emanations. Morgan navigated through the crowd with practiced ease, nodding respectfully to a group of Arcturian philosophers whose compound eyes tracked his movements with undisguised interest. His enhanced contact lenses detected Zethnar's distinctive biosignature the moment she entered the gardens. He didn't have to wait long. "Ambassador Hayes?" Zethnar's voice came from behind him on a private terrace overlooking an artificial Keldorian sea. "Your recovery appears adequate." Morgan turned to face her, noting how her scales had settled into a formal diplomatic pattern, blue with gold highlights, rather than the aggressive purple of their last encounter. "Supreme Delegate, your concern is appreciated. Your colleague is playing a dangerous game," she said without preamble, her vertical pupils narrowing to slits. "Dr. Wei's activities have been noted at the highest levels of our intelligence directorate. Xenoanthropologists are naturally curious," Morgan replied casually, sipping from a flute of iridescent liquid. "Curiosity can be hazardous." One of Zethnar's breathing slits fluttered, that tell again, particularly regarding matters that predate current diplomatic frameworks. Morgan watched her reaction carefully. "Such as the progenitor sites in Proxima Centauri?" Zethnar's scales paled dramatically, confirmation that their investigation had hit something vital. "The progenitors are myth, not history," she responded, but her harmonic undertones wavered. "Myths often contain historical truths," Morgan replied, "just as the truth of what happened in the Grand Assembly Hall has now spread throughout the Confederation. Humans understand vengeance, Supreme Delegate, but we're equally fond of truth. Which would you prefer guides our interactions moving forward?" Before Zethnar could respond, her communication device emitted an urgent signal. The Keldorian's scales flashed with alarm patterns as she received the message. Her gaze snapped back to Morgan, comprehension dawning. His presence on the terrace, the conversation about the progenitors, it had all been misdirection. While they spoke, a joint Earth-Arcturian team had bypassed the security at the Keldorian Historical Repository and accessed the sealed archives. "What have you done?" she hissed. Morgan's neural implant vibrated with a success signal from Alara. Whatever she'd been searching for, she'd found it. "Nothing nearly as interesting as what you've been hiding," he replied calmly. "But I believe that's about to change." The diplomatic fallout was immediate. Accusations of espionage flew between Earth's embassy and the Keldorian High Command. Terms like sacred violation and ancestral desecration dominated official Keldorian communications. Diplomatic immunity prevented arrests, but the relationship between humans and the Empire deteriorated to its lowest point since first contact. Morgan and Ilara retreated to neutral territory. Nexus Station, a massive commercial hub in unclaimed space where dozens of species conducted business beyond the reach of Empire politics. "The evidence is irrefutable," Ilara said, projecting their findings in a secure meeting room. "The Keldorians have been systematically destroying or hiding evidence of the progenitors, an ancient spacefaring species that seeded compatible life throughout this sector of the galaxy. Including humans," added Dr. Kralvex, an Arcturian geneticist whose people had long suspected Keldorian historical revisionism. "The genetic markers are unmistakable. Your species, like ours and at least 20 others, carries the progenitor genome sequence." "But why hide this?" Morgan asked. "What threat does this ancient connection pose to the Keldorian Empire?" A Telosian information broker, her translucent skin glowing with stored data patterns, spoke up. "Because the Keldorians are not progenitor descendants. They evolved independently and conquered this sector after the progenitor's disappearance. Their claim to dominance rests on the myth of being the first spacefaring civilization. And the sites like the one in Proxima Centauri?" Morgan pressed. "Automated genetic repositories," explained Kralvex, "still functional after millions of years. They contain the complete biological and historical records of the progenitor civilization, proof that would undermine the very foundation of Keldorian authority." Morgan considered this information carefully. "Then it's time we change the narrative." 2 weeks later, the Grand Assembly reconvened for an emergency session. The Keldorian Empire had called for sanctions against Earth for alleged espionage. The chamber buzzed with speculation as representatives took their places. When Morgan Hayes entered, the chamber fell silent. His face still bore the faint trace of a bruise, now a badge of honor rather than a mark of shame. Behind him walked representatives from 27 worlds, including several that had never before allied publicly against the Keldorians. "This assembly recognizes Ambassador Hayes," announced the AI moderator. "Distinguished representatives," Morgan began, "I come before you not to defend Earth against Keldorian accusations, but to present evidence of a deception that has shaped our shared history for centuries." The holographic displays activated, showing genetic sequences, star charts, and archaeological findings from multiple worlds. "What you see before you is the truth of our origins. Many of us, humans, Arcturians, Telosians, and others, share a common ancestry. We are all descendants of the progenitors, an advanced civilization that explored and seeded this galaxy long before the rise of the Keldorian Empire." Murmurs spread through the assembly as Morgan continued. "For generations, the Keldorian Empire has systematically destroyed or hidden evidence of this shared heritage, maintaining their position of dominance through historical revisionism rather than legitimate authority." Supreme Delegate Zethnar rose from her seat, scales flashing with rage patterns. "These claims are preposterous. The human ambassador offers speculation and fabricated data." "The data speaks for itself," Morgan interrupted, his voice steady. "And to remove any doubt, I invite representatives to visit the Proxima Centauri repository, which has now been secured by a coalition of progenitor-descendant worlds. There you will find irrefutable evidence of our shared heritage and the Keldorian campaign to erase it." Zethnar moved toward Morgan, her towering form radiating menace. The assembly held its collective breath, anticipating another physical confrontation. But Morgan didn't back down. Instead, he activated a final holographic display, one showing Keldorian military vessels systematically destroying ancient ruins across dozens of worlds over the span of centuries. "Supreme Delegate," Morgan said calmly, "you slapped me because I unwittingly threatened to expose a lie your empire has maintained for generations. Today, I return the favor, not with physical force but with truth. And truth, I assure you, strikes harder than any hand." The evidence was damning. One by one, representatives rose to demand explanations from the Keldorian delegation. Some called for immediate investigations into other buffer zones. Others began formally withdrawing from treaties with the Empire. In the face of overwhelming evidence and rapidly eroding support, Zethnar did the unthinkable. She bowed, a full formal prostration before Morgan and the Assembly. "The Empire acknowledges these truths," she said, her voice stripped of its harmonic undertones. "We seek the Confederation's guidance in establishing a new order, one based on our shared future rather than our selectively remembered past." As the Assembly erupted in excited discussion, Morgan received a private message from Alara. "From slapped diplomat to rewriting galactic history in 2 weeks. Not bad for newcomers to the cosmic stage." Morgan smiled slightly, touching his healed cheek. The Keldorians had ruled through fear and deception for centuries, never imagining that a single act of public humiliation would lead to their downfall. They had slapped a human, expecting submission, and instead unleashed the very quality that had propelled humanity to the stars, and relentless determination to uncover the truth, no matter how deeply buried. As representatives from dozens of worlds approached to form new alliances, Morgan reflected that perhaps the greatest human trait wasn't their resilience or their adaptability, but their persistent refusal to accept that some questions shouldn't be asked and some secrets shouldn't be revealed. The galactic order had been forever changed, not by weapons or warfare, but by curiosity and courage. And in that moment, Morgan knew that humanity had truly found its place among the stars.